heartless millionaire left his pregnant wife in a fire for his mistress, she returned for revenge. He had the world in his grasp, handsome, rich, and esteemed by New York's elite. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, a selfish heart beat. In a devastating turn of events, his pregnant wife found herself trapped in a raging fire that ripped through their estate. Standing amidst the chaos, he made a choice that would define him forever. He pulled his seductive mistress to safety and left his terrified wife behind. Everyone believed she perished in the flames until she returned, haunted by betrayal and determined to make him pay. From glitzy penthouses to hidden plots of retribution, this is their explosive story. Lance Westbrook was not born into wealth. His childhood home in upstate New York had peeling paint and cold floors in winter. His father worked at a local garage, grease under his nails, while his mother juggled shifts at a diner. From an early age, Lance vowed he would never be poor again. He showed a precocious talent for numbers, devouring every library book on business he could find. By 17, he'd launched a small but profitable online retail site, flipping discounted electronics. Admitted to Wharton on a scholarship, he immersed himself in networking. Charisma radiated off him. Professors praised his sharp intellect, and fellow students saw him as a rising star. Upon graduation, he joined Morgan Stanley in Manhattan, quickly making his mark. His gift for reading market trends turned heads at the firm. By his late 20s, he'd moved on from the corporate world to start his own private equity enterprise. Profits soared to dizzying heights. During those early years in the city, Lance met Naomi Ellis, an architectural student at Columbia. She stood out from the socialites he usually encountered. Warm and grounded, Naomi listened intently to his big plans, but never seemed mesmerized by his shiny successes. Lance was intrigued by her steady moral compass and honest laughter. She, in turn, was captivated by his ambition, not because of the money, but because of the spark in his eyes when he described how he wanted to reshape entire industries. They dated for 2 whirlwind years, capturing youthful dreams in late-night walks through Riverside Park. Lance valued Naomi's vision of building livable, sustainable structures for everyday people. She liked that he believed in bold transformations. Despite occasional red flags like Lance's single-minded pursuit of profit, they built a life together, culminating in a lavish wedding on a rooftop overlooking Central Park. City tabloids celebrated them as a power couple, but close friends knew Naomi was the moral anchor in an increasingly cutthroat environment. Months into their marriage, Lance's unstoppable ambition only grew. He diversified his holdings, acquiring real estate in Manhattan, investing in tech startups, and forging partnerships with foreign investors. Their wealth ballooned. They moved into a sprawling penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline. Life seemed perfect on the surface, but behind the facade, subtle cracks formed. Late nights at the office, hush-hush meetings, and a creeping arrogance in Lance's demeanor began to overshadow the love story that had brought them together. Naomi often felt she was speaking to a stranger, one who was so obsessed with material achievements that he barely recognized right from wrong. Neither realized how these cracks would soon open into a canyon of betrayal that no amount of money could fill. Lance's private equity firm, Westbrook Capital, soared in reputation. He graced the pages of the New York Times financial section, heralded as the new face of aggressive buyouts and corporate restructuring. CEOs courted his favor, desperate for capital injections that could rescue or overhaul their companies. Lance reveled in the influence he wielded with a single signature on a dotted line. Deals worth hundreds of millions hinged on his whim. More money, more power, more prestige. He was unstoppable. But as his professional profile rose, so did an insidious sense of entitlement. He demanded immediate results from employees, launched businesses in industries he knew little about, and juggled them with reckless ambition. Meetings turned into screaming matches if targets weren't met. Mistakes, no matter how small, were met with icy retribution. When Naomi gently advised caution, worried about the moral implications of his deals, Lance brushed her off. He dismissed her concerns as naive, telling her that real money wasn't made by playing it safe or being sentimental. Disheartened, Naomi attempted to focus on her architectural projects. She had begun freelancing with a sustainability firm, designing low-income housing developments intended to uplift poorer neighborhoods. Her vision was philanthropic, merging practicality with dignity. Yet whenever she shared a triumph, Lance's attention flickered, as if philanthropic endeavors were a silly hobby in comparison to his billionaire pursuits. He'd congratulate her with hollow words, then pivot back to the stock markets, impatient with anything that wasn't about accelerating returns on investment. The rift between them deepened further when Naomi started noticing questionable tactics at Westbrook Capital. Rumors whispered of insider deals, shell companies, and regulatory lines that Lance and his top associates danced around. She confronted him one evening, voice trembling. He laughed it off, calling it rumor mongering from jealous rivals. But a shadowy look crossed his face, hinting at how far he was willing to go to protect his empire. Then came the first real betrayal. Naomi discovered texts on Lance's phone from a woman named Serafina Rourke. The messages hinted at more than just business, subtle flirtations after work plans. Confronting him, Naomi was met with a wave of denial, swiftly followed by anger for prying. Lance claimed Serafina was a prominent investor's daughter, that the banter was harmless. Naomi wanted to believe him, to trust the man she once adored, yet the emotional distance was undeniable. In bed, Lance either fell asleep mid-conversation or scrolled through his phone until the early hours. Business trips got extended. Intimacy vanished, replaced by a cold, restless tension. Though Naomi prayed it was just a rough patch, a sense of dread pooled in her stomach. If Lance could act so blaze about moral boundaries in business, what lines would he cross in his personal life? She tried ignoring her suspicions, burying herself in architectural plans and hoping love would bridge the gap. She had no way to foresee that a shocking twist, one involving life, death, and unimaginable betrayal lurked on the horizon, ready to strike. As the distance between Lance and Naomi widened, an unexpected development threw their lives into chaos. Naomi discovered she was pregnant. The symptoms started subtly fatigue and a hint of morning nausea. At first, she chalked it up to stress, but a home test confirmed the truth. She was going to have a baby. Despite her reservations about Lance's shifting morals, Naomi felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this child would rekindle the love they once shared and draw them back together. Late one evening, she planned a special dinner in the penthouse, cooking his favorite meal. She lit candles, set the table with fine china, and nervously awaited Lance's arrival. He walked in an hour late, jacket slung over one arm, tie askew. Without pausing to greet her, he mumbled about a failed negotiation, cursing incompetent brokers. Naomi gently led him to the table, trying to calm his simmering rage. Her voice trembled with nervous excitement as she announced, "Lance, we're having a baby." For a moment, he seemed too stunned to speak. Then his expression hardened. Instead of joy, Naomi saw alarm, even frustration. He asked how far along she was, then launched into a flurry of questions about how this would affect their routines. His words cut like ice. "Do you really think this is the best time? With the deals I have coming up, do you think I can handle a newborn right now?" Naomi's heart sank. She had prepared for many possible reactions, tears of joy, perhaps even relief, but not this cold assessment of how a child might inconvenience him. She argued that love didn't have a schedule, that parenthood was a blessing, but Lance barely met her eyes. In the days that followed, he feigned a mechanical sort of support, scheduling doctor's appointments, transferring money into Naomi's account to cover costs. But the intangible warmth of an expectant father was missing. He started sleeping in his home office, claiming stress kept him awake. Once, Naomi overheard him whispering to Serafina Rourke on the phone about business expansions. Though the conversation had a flirtatious undertone, she felt sick to her stomach, wishing the pregnancy would unite them, yet seeing him slip further away. Still, she pressed on. She read baby books, bought prenatal vitamins, tried to cultivate positivity for the little life growing inside her. Each time, she pictured a tiny heartbeat in her womb. She clung to hope. But as Lance's resentment and restlessness grew, a storm of betrayal brewed in the background, culminating in the single act that would shatter all illusions of trust, the fateful night of the fire. Rumors about Lance's affair with Serafina Rourke spread quietly among the wealthy circles he frequented. She was the daughter of Charles Rourke, a veteran investor with ties to old money in Europe. Serafina was known for her striking looks and ruthless charm. She moved through banquets and fundraisers like a swan, leaving male admirers starstruck in her wake. Lance, riding the high of his financial success, found himself gravitating toward her powerful family's network. At first, their relationship masqueraded as business. Serafina pitched a collaborative fund, hoping to merge Westbrook Capital with her father's international assets. Lance welcomed the idea, aware that forging alliances with the Rourkes would catapult his status. Lavish dinners morphed into late-night strategy sessions. Naomi, pregnant and often alone, suspected something deeper was at play but lacked proof. Then, Lance made a grave mistake. One evening, absent-mindedly, he left his phone on the coffee table. A message from Serafina popped onto the screen. "Can't wait to see you again tonight. Miss your touch." Naomi, walking by, glimpsed the text. Her stomach churned. Confronting Lance unleashed a torrent of denial. He claimed it was harmless flirting, a cultural difference, anything to placate her. But Naomi saw the guilt etched in his eyes. Over time, Lance stopped pretending. When Naomi asked if he was actually in love with Serafina, Lance simply said he respected her and enjoyed her intelligence. The semantics only confirmed Naomi's worst fears. Naomi tried to reason with him, reminding him of her pregnancy, pleading for the sake of their unborn child, but Lance remained resolute that business came first and emotional entanglements were unavoidable. In his twisted logic, the potential gains from bonding with the Rourkes justified crossing any moral lines. Serafina, too, was hardly innocent. She relished the power she held over Lance. Naomi became a mere obstacle. She dropped sarcastic remarks at high society events, flaunting her closeness to Lance whenever possible. At times, she'd parade her father's endorsement of Lance's deals as if they were stepping stones to an unspoken engagement. The tabloids, always sniffing for scandal, started hinting at a major shift in Lance Westbrook's personal life. Naomi, feeling battered by heartbreak, retreated into her own sorrow. She busied herself with her architectural drawings, enduring sleepless nights filled with dread about the future. How could a man she once admired, a man she believed was good at heart, become so callous? Each day she awoke, hoping for a miracle, that Lance would come to his senses. But the path he was on led toward one unimaginable act of betrayal. The night the flames rose high, and a single decision spelled out who truly mattered to him and who did not. It happened during a business retreat at the Westbrook countryside estate, an opulent manor perched on a lush estate near the Hudson River. Lance often hosted potential investors there, bringing them away from the city's distractions to finalize lucrative deals. This time, Serafina and her father attended, along with a handful of foreign financiers. Naomi, heavily pregnant by now, was merely a decorative presence at the event. She felt uncomfortable, overshadowed by Serafina's confidence and her father's smooth negotiations with Lance. The evening started with a grand dinner in the manor's dining hall. Crystal chandeliers bathed the table in warm light. Bottles of vintage champagne circulated. Lance was in his element, charming the financiers with tales of expansions, profits, and synergy. Naomi tried to remain composed, forcing smiles and polite conversation despite her inner turmoil. Serafina laughed a little too freely at Lance's jokes, leaning close to him whenever she spoke. After dinner, the group migrated to the manor's large drawing room, complete with a roaring fireplace. Naomi, feeling tired, excused herself to rest upstairs. She felt nauseous, her back ached, and the tension was becoming suffocating. Lance barely noticed her exit, absorbed in a debate about global markets. Serafina's laughter trailed behind Naomi like a mocking echo. Around midnight, as the investors retired to their guest suites, Lance and Serafina lingered near the fireplace. Embers glowed in the hearth, reflecting in her eyes as she whispered sweet promises. Lance, emboldened by wine and self-importance, responded with hushed words of desire. Though the manor was old, with creaking wooden beams, the thought of potential hazards barely registered to anyone. Replacing old wiring or upgrading safety measures was low on Lance's priority list. No one noticed the spark in the fireplace jump onto the threadbare rug, a tiny ember lost in the glow of the night. Within minutes, the old cloth began to smolder. Curtains caught next, dancing with orange tongues of flame. By the time the smoke reached the upper floors, a small inferno had begun to spread, fueled by the manor's aged wooden structure. Naomi woke to the smell of burning. Panic seized her as she realized the corridors were filling with smoke. Disoriented, she rushed to find Lance, calling his name. Flames licked the walls, thick smoke stinging her eyes. She coughed, heart pounding. Her unborn child kicked frantically within her, as if sensing danger. In the chaos, she heard distant shouts. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. How to escape, whether everyone was safe, and where, oh where, was Lance? As the fire grew, the manor's alarms belatedly began to shriek. Confused guests scrambled from their rooms, coughing and stumbling through thick smoke. Downstairs, Lance and Serafina were among the first to notice the flames racing across the rug toward the furniture. A primal fear overtook them. They rushed toward the main exit, ignoring the panicked cries of the staff and investors still fumbling about. Naomi, on the second floor, tried to make her way downstairs. She shielded her nose and mouth with a sleeve, every breath a choking ordeal. Smoke enveloped the corridors, rendering her nearly blind. Her pregnant belly made moving swiftly difficult. She prayed that Lance would come for her, that despite their marital rift, he wouldn't leave her or the child they had created. Finally, she reached the grand staircase, only to see a roaring wall of fire blocking her path. The heat was unbearable, forcing her back. She heard faint voices from below, Lance's voice among them. Summoning what little strength she had, Naomi shouted his name, coughing violently. But the flames crackled louder, drowning her out. Outside, Lance and Serafina burst through the main door with a small cluster of terrified guests. Fresh air filled their lungs, a stark contrast to the suffocating haze inside. Staff scrambled to call 911, and someone shouted for everyone to stand back as the flames devoured the manor's old timbers. Lance, eyes wild, scanned the gathering crowd, foreign financiers, staff members. Serafina clinging to him in panic. He realized Naomi was missing, and the weight of that realization flickered across his face. For a heartbeat, he seemed conflicted. But then Serafina grabbed his arm, tears streaking her cheeks, begging him not to go back inside. She cried that it was too dangerous, that the house was moments from collapse. A rush of selfish fear overcame him, fear of dying, fear of losing everything. He let out a strangled breath, turned away from the burning doorway, and allowed Serafina to drag him further from the inferno. Naomi's name died on his lips. Inside, Naomi clung to the banister, feeling the heat sear her skin. She thought of her unborn child. Desperate, she tried to find another exit. By a stroke of fortune, she remembered the estate's back staircase leading to the kitchen. Crouching low, she navigated the smoke-filled corridor. The journey was excruciating, flames licking at her heels, beams collapsing around her. But maternal instinct drove her on. She stumbled through the kitchen door, bursting into the cool night air just as a section of the roof caved in. When the fire trucks finally arrived, they found Naomi unconscious near the estate's back lawn, her body scorched, clothes singed, yet miraculously alive. Lance, preoccupied with Serafina's safety and the potential liability claims, never realized that at that exact moment, the paramedics were rushing Naomi and their unborn child to Mount Sinai Hospital, clinging to the narrowest thread of life. By the time dawn broke, the once majestic countryside manor had been reduced to smoking ruins. Lance lingered at the edge of the property, arms wrapped around Serafina as firefighters doused the last embers. He offered statements to the local news, spinning it as a tragic accident, old wiring, a forgotten spark. Worried about the blow to his image, he made sure to hint at large donations to the local fire department for new equipment. Even now, in the aftermath of horror, he thought first of damage control. He believed Naomi was lost in the blaze. A strange numbness enveloped him, part shock, part relief. But he also felt a gnawing guilt that he brushed aside. He convinced himself that no one could have survived that inferno. Reporting Naomi's death would be easier than explaining how he'd failed to save her. He knew the press would eventually descend on this story, and he planned to spin it in a way that painted him as a grieving husband. Meanwhile, Naomi lay in critical condition at Mount Sinai Hospital's burn unit. The paramedics had found her barely breathing. She had second and third-degree burns along her arms and torso. Smoke inhalation scarred her lungs. Doctors scrambled to stabilize her vital signs, administering oxygen and the fourth fluids. The risk of infection was high. Most pressing of all was the welfare of her unborn baby. The medical team held an emergency consultation. The trauma was severe, and the baby's life hung in the balance. Naomi drifted in and out of consciousness, oblivious to the chaos around her. In moments of lucidity, she whispered Lance's name, then coughed violently as the ventilator hissed. Nightmares plagued her, visions of fire, of Lance turning his back on her, of Serafina's triumphant smirk. She felt her unborn child's faint movements like a plea to keep fighting. A day later, the doctors faced a critical juncture. They performed an emergency procedure to save the baby, a tiny girl who arrived prematurely but clung stubbornly to life. Naomi's condition remained touch and go, an infection threatening to wreak havoc. Yet her body, fueled by maternal love, fought against the odds. Word of Naomi's miraculous survival did not reach Lance. She was listed under a Jane Doe in the hospital records standard procedure for unidentified trauma victims with no ID on them. The hospital staff had no way of contacting next of kin. Meanwhile, Lance and Serafina left the charred ruins behind, returning to Manhattan. The tragedy that should have broken Lance's conscience instead pushed him further into a twisted rationalization. If Naomi was gone, he could continue with Serafina, free of any guilt or obligations. But life had other plans. Naomi's survival would soon be the catalyst for a reckoning more terrifying than any blaze. 2 weeks after the fire, Naomi regained consciousness. A dull ache coursed through her body, punctuated by stinging pain whenever she moved. Bandages swathed much of her skin, hiding the raw, burned flesh beneath. Machines beeped steadily, tracking her vital signs. Slowly, she pieced together flashes of memory, the smoke, the flames, Lance's absence in her darkest hour. She panicked, recalling her pregnancy. Almost in response, a soft cry echoed from a nearby bassinet, her newborn daughter. Nurses stepped in, calming Naomi's frantic questions. Against the odds, her baby had survived. Weak and premature, yes, but very much alive. Naomi wept, arms trembling as she cradled the tiny infant. The child's skin was delicate, eyes fluttering with life Naomi had feared was lost. When hospital administrators tried to confirm Naomi's identity, she struggled to speak. Her throat felt raw from inhalation injuries. She managed to whisper her name, Naomi Westbrook, but the surname triggered no response from the staff. Officially, she was still recorded as Jane Doe. She had no phone or ID, everything had been destroyed. The local police had not linked her to the manor fire, as Lance had provided them with incomplete information. He mentioned Naomi's supposed tragic death, but no body had been recovered. Naomi realized with horror that Lance believed she was dead and that he might be relieved about it. Summoning what little energy she had, she begged the hospital staff for a phone. Her immediate thought was to call her parents, who lived several states away. But they had never approved of her marriage to Lance, and she'd lost touch over the years. She dialed old numbers, only to reach disconnected lines or strangers. Meanwhile, she discovered from a newspaper clipping a nurse provided that Lance was continuing his business as usual, with Serafina by his side at corporate galas. The obituary for Naomi Westbrook was suspiciously absent. Perhaps Lance found it more convenient to let the rumor of her death float quietly, overshadowed by the tragic accident. Naomi seethed with a fury stronger than any physical pain. She saw her disfigured reflection in a small handheld mirror, a face she barely recognized. Yet the baby's presence reminded her she had a reason to fight. If Lance had left her for dead, she would make sure he faced the consequences. The seeds of revenge took root in her wounded heart, nourished by betrayal and heartbreak. She refused to let the hospital discharge her under her real name, fearful that Lance might discover her survival prematurely and snatch away her child. She concocted a plan to rebuild her strength, find trusted allies, and strike at Lance when he least expected. The flames that nearly ended her life now fueled a passion for justice that burned brighter than any inferno. Naomi spent 3 long months in Mount Sinai Hospital's burn unit. She battled infection after infection, endured multiple surgeries, and underwent agonizing physical therapy to regain mobility in her arms. Each day, she demanded to see her child. Stroking the baby's tiny fingers, she drew courage from that fragile life. The staff, moved by her resilience, gave her the best care possible. Funds were an issue, but an anonymous donor, a retired nurse who'd been touched by Naomi's plight, stepped in to cover critical expenses. Naomi resolved to repay that kindness one day. During these painful weeks, Naomi discovered a quiet ally in a young nurse named Dara Lynn. Empathetic and discreet, Dara helped Naomi piece together news from the outside world. She printed articles about Lance and Serafina attending philanthropic events, read business magazines detailing Westbrook Capital's expansions. Each snippet of information slashed at Naomi's heart. Lance acted every bit the wealthy bachelor, forging deeper ties with the Rourkes. Apparently unaffected by the tragedy, bitter determination coalesced in Naomi's mind. Once she was strong enough, she'd leave the hospital quietly, She and her daughter, whom she'd named Luna, would vanish, giving Naomi time to strategize. She refused to let Lance suspect her survival until she had the power to confront him on her own terms. If she revealed herself too soon, he might use his considerable influence to undermine her credibility or take Luna away. Step by step, Naomi learned how to walk again without excruciating pain. Physical therapy sessions, combined with her innate grit, gradually restored her strength. She also consulted a trauma counselor who urged her to confront the emotional toll. At times, Naomi felt consumed by rage, haunted by the image of Lance fleeing the fire with Serafina, leaving her to die. But Luna's needs kept her anchored. She would not let hatred erode her ability to be a loving mother. When the day of discharge arrived, Naomi left under a pseudonym, with official records listing her as an out-of-state burn victim. Dara helped arrange a small, modest apartment in a quieter part of the city, courtesy of a local charity that placed trauma survivors in transitional housing. Naomi used the last of her savings to secure the spot, forging an agreement to pay rent once she could work again. Alone in that humble apartment, with baby Luna gurgling softly, Naomi felt a surge of determination. Lance Westbrook might be the darling of Wall Street, but he was also a soulless coward who left his pregnant wife to burn. She vowed she'd gather evidence of his crimes, financial, moral, and beyond. She would rip away his false halo in the public eye. Then, when he finally saw her face again, scarred yet unbroken, she'd unleash a reckoning more brutal than any flames that once consumed her. Life in her modest, new apartment was a far cry from the penthouse Naomi once called home. Medical bills still loomed, and caring for Luna demanded constant energy. But every time she felt overwhelmed, she reminded herself of her mission to expose Lance Westbrook for who he truly was and ensure he could never hurt anyone again. Her first step was building a support network. She reached out to Dara Lynn for medical advice and emotional backup. Through Dara, she also connected with a local women's shelter that specialized in helping survivors of domestic and emotional abuse. Although Lance had never physically harmed Naomi before the fire, the betrayal amounted to a profound violation. The shelter offered legal resources and introduced Naomi to a pro bono investigator named Colin Chase, a retired detective with a passion for justice. Colin listened carefully to Naomi's story, eyes darkening at the mention of Lance's callousness. He agreed to help her dig into Westbrook Capital's dealings, suspecting there might be skeletons in Lance's corporate closet. Together, they formed a clandestine plan: gather evidence of any illegal or unethical practices, quietly verify Naomi's account of the fire, and compile enough proof to blow Lance's carefully constructed image to smithereens. Naomi learned from Colin that Westbrook Capital was rumored to be engaged in shady deals overseas, allegations of bribery, shady shell companies, and even sabotage of competitor projects. Colin had contacts in the finance world who owed him favors. He believed if they could link Lance's personal actions to these fraudulent schemes, the authorities would pounce. Naomi, for her part, had unique knowledge of Lance's routine, confidants, and thought processes. She recalled half-overheard phone calls, suspicious wire transfers, and personal diaries. Lance sometimes scribbled in after a big victory. Still, evidence alone wasn't enough. Naomi wanted to confront Lance face to face, to see the look in his eyes when he realized she was alive. But the wise counsel from Colin and Dara urged patience. It was dangerous to tip Lance off. He was wealthy, powerful, and unscrupulous, capable of paying off law enforcement or burying lawsuits under an army of lawyers. Another risk: he might come after Naomi or, worse, try to claim Luna if he knew the baby existed. So Naomi began her days caring for her infant daughter, while nights were spent poring over old documents, searching for any lead that might implicate Lance. Each phone call with Colin yielded fresh possibilities. Meanwhile, rumors swirled in society columns that Lance and Serafina were planning a grand engagement. The tabloids dubbed them the golden couple, the wealthy financier and his brilliant partner from an old money family. Naomi could practically taste her anger every time she saw a headline about them. The world might see a fairy tale, but she knew it was a castle built on ashes, and she was about to bring it crashing down. Weeks stretched into months. Naomi's face had mostly healed, though scars remained on her arms and shoulders. Her hair, once long and lustrous, was cropped short to manage the areas singed by the flames. Still, her gaze gleamed with a steely resolve. She took cautious steps outside her apartment, wearing hats and scarves to avoid being recognized. She was determined to keep her existence a secret until the moment was ripe. In this period of strategic planning, a surprise visitor arrived, Danielle Fisher, a disgruntled former executive assistant at Westbrook Capital. Colin had discovered her name in a list of ex-employees who left under mysterious circumstances. When Danielle heard about Naomi's quest for justice, she reached out covertly, claiming she had crucial information. They met at a quiet cafe in a less fashionable part of the city, well away from Lance's typical haunts. Danielle appeared nervous, glancing over her shoulder as she spoke. She revealed that, over her 3-year tenure, she'd witnessed hush-hush transactions and overheard phone calls that indicated money laundering, insider trading, and bribes to foreign officials. She had copies of emails, bank statements, digital footprints that could tie Lance directly to criminal activity. The catch? She needed protection. Lance's lawyers had threatened her when she attempted to negotiate a severance package, accusing her of breach of contract if she leaked any corporate secrets. Naomi assured Danielle she wasn't alone in this fight. Colin arrived soon after, exchanging details and verifying Danielle's claims. Danielle's trove of evidence was a game-changer. If properly presented to law enforcement and the media, it could trigger a full-scale investigation, possibly toppling Westbrook Capital. Naomi's heart pounded at the possibility, forcing Lance to face public disgrace and legal consequences. It was more than she dared hope for. But Danielle also brought news that chilled Naomi's blood. Westbrook Capital had been quietly searching for Naomi's remains. The official story was that no body was found after the fire, and Lance spun it as an unspeakable tragedy, perhaps. Wild animals had dragged her away, or the flames had been too intense to leave remains. The firm hired private detectives to close the case, ensuring no questions remained that might tarnish Lance's narrative. If these investigators discovered Naomi was alive, they might take drastic steps to silence her. Naomi clenched her jaw, grateful for Danielle's warning. A new sense of urgency pulsed through her. Time was running out. She needed to finalize her plan to strike at Lance before he discovered her survival. It was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with powerful players on both sides. But with Luna's presence in her life, Naomi refused to let fear overrule her quest. She'd face the danger head-on. After all, she'd already walked through fire. Facing a corrupt millionaire who once loved her was only the next challenge in a life reshaped by betrayal. The walls around Lance Westbrook began to tighten, though he remained blissfully unaware. Behind the scenes, Naomi, Colin, and Danielle meticulously organized the trove of evidence, digital proof of Lance's illegal dealings, witness statements from ex-employees, and details about the hush money paid to regulatory officials. They also mapped out a timeline of Lance's actions leading up to the catastrophic fire. Each puzzle piece fit together, forming a damning picture of a man who put profit and personal gain above human life. Meanwhile, rumors about Lance and Serafina's engagement grew stronger. Invitations for an extravagant celebration circulated among Manhattan's elite. Lance had rented the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel for the announcement, aiming to impress the Rourke family's European connections. The event was set to be a spectacle, a list celebrities, influential politicians, and foreign dignitaries on the guest list. In an ironic twist, it was scheduled for the exact date that would have marked Lance and Naomi's third wedding anniversary. Naomi felt a deep pang when she learned of the event. The memory of her own wedding day stung like a fresh wound. She wondered how Lance could so casually discard everything they'd shared. But fury quickly overshadowed her hurt. She resolved to make the Plaza Gala the scene of Lance's undoing. If he wanted to flaunt his new life, she would ensure his old sins were laid bare before all the cameras and the city's most influential figures. To execute this, Naomi needed one last piece, a personal confrontation. She wanted to see if Lance harbored any regret or remorse. She arranged a clandestine meeting under an alias posing as a potential investor from a Middle Eastern royal family. With Danielle's help, she secured a short appointment at Westbrook Capital's skyscraper. The plan was to gauge his readiness, or to confirm if he truly cared nothing for the life he took from her. Colin argued that revealing herself prematurely was dangerous, but Naomi insisted on witnessing Lance's arrogance firsthand. She'd take precautions, a disguised appearance, a voice modulator if necessary. Each passing hour, Naomi's adrenaline spiked. She carefully rehearsed how to handle the confrontation, reminding herself that her prime directive was to collect final proof. But an undercurrent of raw emotion coursed through her. She wanted to stand before Lance as the living testament he'd tried to snuff out. She wanted to watch his face when the realization struck that she had survived, that their unborn child had survived, and that the revenge she'd nurtured was about to scorch his life. Outside, Manhattan's busy streets glistened, unaware of the cataclysm that would soon unfold within its gilded halls. The countdown to the Plaza event marched on. Naomi inhaled, gathering her courage. Lance Westbrook would learn that some fires can't be extinguished, and the flames of betrayal always burn back. The day Naomi marched into Westbrook Capital felt surreal, dressed in a sleek, conservative suit and wearing tinted glasses to mask her eyes. She arrived at the gleaming skyscraper that soared above Midtown. Danielle had arranged an appointment under the pseudonym Amira Khalid, an interested Middle Eastern investor. Colin stood a few blocks away with a small team, ready to intervene if anything went awry. Naomi's heart hammered in her chest as she passed security, forging a calm exterior that belied her turbulent emotions. On the executive floor, a polished receptionist led Naomi to Lance's corner office, a panoramic view of the city offered behind towering glass windows. The air smelled of expensive cologne and freshly printed contracts. Naomi braced herself, the burn scars on her arms tingling beneath her blouse. Then she saw him. Lance stood by his desk, phone in hand, discussing some urgent deal. Despite the passage of time, he looked almost unchanged, confident posture, slicked back hair, a tailored suit that screamed affluence. His voice carried that same arrogance she remembered too well. When he turned around and glanced at Naomi, he offered a dismissive smile, barely looking up from his phone. "Miss Khalid?" "Pleasure," he said briskly, motioning for her to sit. "Let's be quick. I have a flight to catch for a major investor meeting in London tomorrow." Naomi's pulse pounded. She slid into the chair across from him, scanning his face for any glimmer of guilt or recognition. He remained oblivious. As he began rattling off Westbrook Capital's portfolio highlights, she felt a wave of repulsion. This was the man who left her in a burning building. Yet here he was, boasting about his transparent and forward-thinking approach to global investments. Clenching her teeth, Naomi let him spin his sales pitch. Eventually, she placed a folder on the desk, a printout of damning financial records Danielle had provided. "I've done my research, Mr. Westbrook," she said, modulating her voice to be unrecognizably low. "And I find certain transactions concerning." Lance frowned, flipping through the sheets. Naomi watched his expression shift from confusion to alarm. He tried to mask it with a confident sneer. "I'm not sure where you got these documents, Miss Khalid, but they're out of context." A surge of satisfaction lanced through Naomi. She allowed her glasses to slip slightly, revealing a glimpse of her eyes. "Tell me, Lance," she said quietly, dropping the fake accent. "Do you remember the fire at your countryside manor? The one where your pregnant wife supposedly died?" He froze, color draining from his face. For an agonizing heartbeat, confusion warred with terror. Recognition flickered. Naomi removed her glasses fully, letting him see the faint scar tracing her temple. His breath caught. Naomi?" he stammered, voice cracking. She savored the panic that contorted his features. Trembling with rage, she leaned forward, voice tight. "I survived. And so did our child. Your entire world is about to implode. Enjoy your final moments of power, Lance, because they're almost over." For days after the confrontation, Lance lived in dread. He cancelled his London trip, frantically meeting with lawyers and private investigators to contain any fallout. He tried to track Naomi down, suspecting she'd gone underground. But his resources came up short. She was elusive, guarded by Colin's network. All he could do was press forward with his glamorous engagement gala at the Plaza Hotel, hoping to salvage his image. Serafina and her father insisted the show must go on, a demonstration of resilience and wealth in the face of rumor. Lance, sleepless and paranoid, reluctantly agreed. The night of the gala, the plaza's grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and elegantly set tables. 6 arrived in designer gowns and black tie suits, greeted by paparazzi thronging the hotel entrance. Lance moved through the crowd mechanically, forced smiles plastered on his face. Serafina clung to his arm, oblivious to the personal crisis roiling beneath his polished veneer. He noticed a heavier security presence, presumably hired by Serafina's father to ensure no unpleasant surprises marred their big announcement. But Naomi was already inside, hidden among the staff. Colin had secured a catering uniform for her, complete with a cap that concealed her hair and partially shadowed her face. Danielle mingled nearby with a forged press pass, a camera around her neck. It was a well-orchestrated infiltration, timed down to the minute. Naomi's heart hammered as she carried champagne flutes across the parquet floor. She spotted Lance and Serafina greeting guests at the dais. The sight of them stung like a fresh wound, but her fury gave her focus. As dinner concluded, a hush fell. Serafina's father took the microphone, welcoming everyone. He launched into a glowing endorsement of Lance, praising his brilliance and philanthropic spirit. Then Lance stepped up, forced to deliver a speech about love, partnership, and the future. The hypocrisy made Naomi's blood boil. At that moment, Colin signaled from the back of the room. Danielle poised her camera, and Naomi steeled herself. She walked to the center of the ballroom, ignoring staff who told her to wait outside. She approached a large projection screen that had been set up for a celebratory slideshow. Before security could intercept, Danielle cued a hidden laptop feed. The screen flickered images of incriminating emails, fraudulent bank statements, and a flurry of official documents exposing Westbrook Capital's crimes. The crowd gasped. Lance spun around, eyes bulging in horror. He tried to wave security over, but Naomi stepped forward, removing her cap, letting the overhead lights reveal her scarred face. Gasps rippled through the room. Some recognized her from society pages as Lance's long-lost wife. "Allow me to introduce myself," Naomi said, voice clear despite her racing heartbeat. I am Naomi Westbrook, left for dead by this man, and I have evidence he's committed fraud, bribery, and more. The man you celebrate tonight is a monster. Pandemonium erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, Serafina recoiled, shock etched across her face. Lance staggered, swallowing convulsively, as if the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Naomi felt a fierce triumph. Her final blow was imminent, and nothing, no amount of money or power could douse the flames of justice she had ignited. The ballroom descended into chaos. Security guards surged forward, but the media pounced too, capturing every angle of the scandal unfolding. Flashes lit up Naomi's determined face and Lance's shell-shocked expression. Guests scrambled to distance themselves from the disgraced millionaire. Serafina's father stood rooted in disbelief, cursing under his breath as he realized the magnitude of Lance's downfall. Naomi pivoted to face the cameras, brandishing copies of the documents that Danielle had helped compile. "This is the man you revered," she stated, voice steely. "He left me, his pregnant wife, in a burning building. He's defrauded investors, bribed officials, and stolen from honest people." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the silent crowd. "I survived barely. Our daughter survived too, thanks to the mercy of strangers. Now, let the world know who Lance Westbrook truly is." Police officers arrived, tipped off by Colin's team about potential criminal evidence. Colin himself stood in the background, arms folded, handing over a neatly labeled dossier to the lead detective. Officers approached Lance, who was too stunned to resist, as they led him aside for questioning. His face was ashen, words failing him. He glanced at Naomi one final time, eyes brimming with a mixture of panic and a glimmer of regret. From the corner of her eye, Naomi noticed Serafina trembling, tears streaking her mascara. Serafina stared at Naomi, fear mingling with an odd respect. But Naomi had no time for pity. Her vengeance was complete. She watched as Lance tried to stammer denials, but the weight of evidence smothered any chance of escape. The press devoured every detail, broadcasting the fall of a financial titan who, until this very moment, appeared untouchable. In the aftermath, authorities froze Westbrook Capital's assets, pending a full investigation. Lawsuits from shareholders multiplied. Lance faced charges ranging from fraud to endangering human life. His carefully curated empire began to collapse overnight, major clients fleeing in droves. Serafina and her father, desperate to protect their own name, distanced themselves from Lance. Their alliance, once seen as unstoppable, fractured under the scorching glare of truth. Naomi, although battered by her own ordeal, felt a powerful release. The vengeance she'd nurtured had found its perfect stage. Still, a quiet sadness lingered. She never wanted to become a person who thrived on destruction, but Lance's betrayal demanded a reckoning. Now she could finally move forward, her child safe, her conscience free of the lie that was once her marriage. In the days that followed, Naomi returned to her modest apartment. Luna lay in a cradle by the window, sunlight dancing across her innocent face. The infant cooed as Naomi leaned over, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. She knew challenges remained: financial stability, physical and emotional healing from the trauma. But she also knew her strength, tempered by the fire that tried to consume her. Gazing at the city skyline beyond, Naomi resolved to rebuild her life from the ashes. She wasn't the naive architect student who fell for a heartless millionaire's charm. She was a survivor, a mother, and a woman who'd proven that karma might be slow, but it is always certain. And in that knowledge, she found peace. Fate has a way of leveling even the tallest towers built on lies. Lance Westbrook learned that wealth and power cannot shield one from the consequences of a callous heart. In the end, his empire collapsed under the weight of its own deceit, leaving him exposed and alone. Naomi, once a loving wife, channeled her suffering into the flames of determination, emerging stronger as both a mother and a survivor. Her courage became a beacon, proving that truth and resilience can triumph over betrayal. If the intensity of this story kept you on the edge of your seat or reminded you that justice, though slow, is inevitable, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every bit of your support allows us to bring you more dramatic, thought-provoking tales. Stay with us for the next story that dives into the depths of ambition, love, and the unbreakable human spirit.